What's going on, all my cool cats? Welcome to another webisode special of the Real Sharks podcast. It's me, Rob, and I want to talk about while we're all quarantined indoors, and of course, one of my favorite sports was canceled. One of the very first ones that took place this year was the NBA, the National Basketball Association. I happen to be a fan of basketball. Unfortunately, my team sucks, but that's not the point. The point is, here I wanted to deliver to you, my audience, some interesting films that I consider to be, trivial to basketball. There's not many basketball films out there, but the ones that are out there that aren't comedies, you know, they're interesting. Some of them start with good intentions, some of them are great, and some of them are just they get lost in I think the times they came out, which is some of these is the early '90s. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started with them. My first one I want to bring to you is Above the Rim, 1994. This is a film that was directed and co-written by Jeff Pollock. For those of you who don't know who Jeff Pollock is, he co-wrote The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, which is what he is most known for. So Above the Rim was actually his first directorial debut, so to say. So Above the Rim is an interesting film. It talks about a player by the name of Kyle Watson, who's kind of in the middle with attitude and his skills as a basketball player. He's a great player. He's played by Dwan Martin, who is in Periscope and White Man Can't Jump. His whole goal in this film is to get into Georgetown University, which I know some of you NBA fans out there know was where Patrick Ewing went. But while he's waiting for this scholarship, he's asked to be in a neighborhood tournament between his coach named Mike Rollins and against the neighborhood thug Birdie, who's played by Tupac Shakur, actually the rapper for those of you who don't know. And Marlon Wayans is in this film. He plays Boogie. He's kind of the catalyst that brings Kyle and Birdie together. And it's interesting because he's kind of the stupid, picked on guy from both sides of it, so he kind of fades out later on in the film. But then you got a guy named Thomas Shep who's dating Kyle's mom, who Kyle basically hates because his mom is falling in love with him, and he has a whole history in the film too, a subplot so to say, where he's fighting these inner demons of losing his best friend while playing a game. They used to play real physical games at nighttime. I don't know where you would find a basketball hoop on the roof, but I guess there was a basketball hoop on the roof, and it gets real physical between the two of them, real competitive, so they decide to try to touch the rim, to go above the rim, so to say. And while they're doing this, his friend accidentally jumps through, basically, the backboard, his hand goes through the backboard and he falls, and that's his whole arc, is he's haunted by his best friend, so you'll see him late at night, spooky enough no one else is watching him. He basically plays with a phantom ball against his old teammate, and he also happens to be Birdie's older brother, which also brings a lot of tension into the film because he knows his brother's a bad guy. He wants his brother to stay away from someone who he kind of sees as himself. So the film kind of continues off into this whole tournament, and Tupac basically trying to lure Kyle over to his side, but through various people that help him, everything, Kyle of course chooses the right side. This is one of those typical movies of where you have a hero character that can't decide which side to be on. Is he going to be bad? Is he going to be good? Oh, the bad side, seduces him a little bit, but then ultimately he goes to what's right, and he goes and he plays the game. But you also have the other kind of cliche entrance of the player, out of nowhere, who's not really on the team, who they're like, hey, he can't play, he's not even on the roster. Yes, he is, he's right there. And that's what Thomas Shep's character basically does in the movie. He enters a late game to help his team because Boogie's team plays so physical and thuggish, and they're just killing all the other players, basically just putting them in wheelchairs. And he helps them ultimately win the game. But overall, Above the Rim is a decent basketball film. It's not really, it's more of the hood-based films, from like Boys in the Hood, Menace to Society, Juice, South Central. It kind of can be almost looped in with those as a pure gangster flick more than a basketball movie. However, there are some aspects of the nostalgia of basketball that make it an interesting film. I think Above the Rim is a movie that one should watch when going through basketball films. It's not it's gonna leave a footnote on you for some reason, because you're gonna say, wow, this is a time capsule. You know, Tupac's there. This is, you know, he, of course, he's huge, and that may be why too this movie survives more on, is because this is one of the only films that he ever did. He, you know, the iconic rapper Tupac ever did. So that's why I think it also has a huge leg to stand on, is because just the nostalgia of him being in there. It's a film that had a budget of $6.5 million and made $16 million back. That's, you know, not the greatest. I wouldn't merit a sequel on it. It didn't obviously need a sequel because it's a pretty open and closed film. Because overall, the film itself is a very poor script. It's a very weak script. But I give Above the Rim at least a 6.5. I think it's an interesting film. It's worth a glance. So the next film I actually want to get into is one I'm really not a big fan of, Sunset Park. However, this film is now over 20 years old, and it actually premiered in the month of April, which was one of the reasons I brought up this segment here for you all. Another basketball movie, but this one is, oh man, is it so on the nose. It only made $10 million at the box office. It stars Rhea Perlman, Danny DeVito's wife, which he was actually a big producer in this film, Fredro Starr, and Terrence Howard, DeAndre Bonds. This movie, it's one of the most popular basketball movies around, and I don't know why, because it's bad. It's so bad. It's so on the nose. I mean, we've seen this story thousands of times. I feel like, I know not thousands, not bajillions of times, but we've seen it enough. This movie is basically the Dangerous Minds of basketball movies, and that's probably why it has this formula from this time period, with Dangerous Minds being a successful, influential film. Even though that movie took from To Sir With Love, starring my man Sidney Poitier, but I digress. Because it's just basically about the teacher that comes in to take over the renegade, you know, basketball team, because they don't know what to do with themselves, and they're just all thugs themselves. And it's so, I mean, I know I keep saying this, on the nose, but it's such a weak script of a movie. It's such a poor film. The kids themselves seems like they're just cut from every single stereotypical script. You have the thuggish, you know, nomad kind of guy who doesn't like to take in. I mean, just like Dangerous Minds, the thuggish kind of nomad kind of guy who doesn't have to do anything. You know, he's the one you got to get the approval from, otherwise the other team won't fall in line. You have the geek, you know, who no one understands. There's just a ton of these cliche aspects in this film. But what really bothers me the most is just how the ending is, because the ending is it's a shallow ending. Basically, you know, spoilers, the whole premise and why they fall in love with their coach, because their coach starts to help them win, and of course they're starting to do awesome, you know, by her helping them throughout their personal problems. But then when they find out that, guess what, she's not going to be coaching the team after the season, and they lose their minds. And it's like, what? That's what these characters are mad about? Is their coach that just came in and helped them is just going to leave after one season, and that's it? Oh my god, it's the end of the world, so we hate her now. We hate her, and we refuse to listen to her. We're going to revert back to our old ways, and then of course she's going to come back and save everybody. And I think Sunset Park is not overrated or underrated. I just think it's just there. It's just a basketball film because it's a basketball film. Because there's not very many out there, as I've said. This film, I don't recommend. However, it is so popular and so memorable, I guess you could say, that I would suggest people do give it a run if you're bored and you have nothing else to watch. Sorry if you're a big fan of this film, but I can't think of too many reasons why I like this film. It just seemed like a cash grab off a idea like Dangerous Minds. Insert different theme basketball here and make money. And I like Danny DeVito, and I love his work, and I've always appreciated the films he helped produce. He also produced, he also helped produce Pulp Fiction, for many people who don't know that. But this Sunset Park is the sunset needs to go down on this movie. Womp womp. Because I give it a 5. Now, this next film I have for you, my audience, is a personal favorite of mine, so maybe biased in my opinion of it, because it was a failure. I won't lie, but it is truly, I think, the best, and I'm comfortable saying that actually. I think it is the best basketball film out there because it is more than just about basketball in itself. It's about the inner workings of basketball, life itself, corruption between the system, the inner workings of basketball and college prospects. I mean, everything, and that's He Got Game. And He Got Game had an estimated budget of $25 million, and it only grossed $21 million back, so that's not a very good, successful film. However, it had an all-star cast of Denzel Washington playing Jake Shuttlesworth. You had Ray Allen playing Jesus Shuttlesworth. You had Mila Jovovich in the film. You had a lot of prominent actors in this movie. The story told in the way only Spike Lee could tell it. But it's about, basically, Jake Shuttlesworth is doing time in the state prison for the murder of his wife. And everyone finds out that, of course, his son is the top prospect in the nation. So he is let out to basically recruit his son for the warden's favorite college team. And if he's successful, then he might get out early. If he's not, then it's, no one cares. But the whole film is more than about basketball. Maybe I say this as a father, but it's about a father and son and the battle, to reestablish love between a father and son when a great tragedy has befallen a family. I think is something He Got Game really, really puts to the forefront, is about forgiveness. It may be about basketball and it may be about corruption, but it's also about forgiveness, which is interesting why Ray Allen's character's name is Jesus, even though Jesus in the movie is played off as a comedic type pun to his name with a lot of people. People like, oh, it's Jesus, help me, Jesus. But the reason he was named Jesus was actually off an NBA star from that Denzel Washington, his father loved. But beyond that, though, it is about forgiveness. And the ironic thing is that his son's name is Jesus, and he has to forgive his father for the murder of his mother, and potentially save his father is a very, very powerful thing in this film. There's a lot of things to it about, raising your child, being a man, being a woman too. There's just a lot of interesting things that go on in this film. And I mean that like there's not a ton of subplots. There's just, wow, that is so true to life in great detail. Many people don't ever put that on screen, which is something Spike Lee is able to do all the time, and which I really credit Spike Lee for. I really credit Spike Lee for this film. This was a incredible film, I thought, the first time I seen it. I recommend this film. I actually think this film gets a lot of bad rap for no reason. I think the argument can be made that it's not really about basketball in a sense, but it is about basketball. I mean, yes, there isn't very few games played. There isn't a comeback game. There isn't anything like that, but there is the push that basketball is the only thing that guided this family through the hardship, and basketball is what's going to kind of either break or make it kind of thing. And that's why I think He Got Game is such a powerful film. I mean, powerful in very, very ways, especially a story between a father and a son and forgiveness. So I personally like He Got Game. I give it a personal 8. However, though, I know what the critics will say about it. But if you love my recommendations, then I highly recommend this film. But that's going to be my bit for basketball movies. Hope you've enjoyed it. Please listen, like, and subscribe, and share. This is your host, Rob, and I will catch you on the flip side.